Welcome back, everyone. My name is Stephanie Hicks, and I'm here with my co-host, John Muscelli, and we are the Corresponding Author Podcast, episode 19, I believe. So we're doing this a little bit early this morning, so bear with us. I've had my coffee. Hopefully John is just as excited as well. Um, and
Yeah, we
today,
usually record after hours, right? Not necessarily in the morning.
yeah, so we'll see how this
Yeah.
goes. But this was the best time that worked for everybody. So um, today we thought we would talk about something that I often talk with students and postdocs about, and something that I thought a lot about whenever I was doing my training. And it's there's this phrase that's often used in industry of building a data science portfolio. And then in academics, there's also this phrase of building an academic portfolio that exists. And today we want to talk about kind of that intersection of the two. What is an academic data science portfolio? Why would you want to build such a thing? How would you know when you need to build it? What would you put in it? Why is it important? Things like that. Does that sound good, John?
That sounds great.
Okay, so how about you start us off and give us maybe an kind of an overview of what would you consider a data science portfolio for industry, and then what would you consider like an academic portfolio, just like a traditional academic portfolio in academia?
Yeah, the first things first is like let's be clear. Like in academia, like the CV reigns supreme over like everything, right?
Yes.
Like portfolio, whatever you say, like 99 times out of 100 when someone is like, what does that person do, they will almost surely go to your CV or like a Google Scholar page or something like that, and your website. So just in academia, no matter I think what we say about portfolios, like the CV is a type of portfolio, but the portfolio is a little bit different. But just to be clear, like CVs usually reign supreme, but for portfolios, I think it's a lot more about practice in many respects. In data science, I think so DataQuest has a good blog post about some of these things. So what do employers look for? Extracting insights from raw data, presenting those insights to others, building systems that offer direct value to the customer. So some of these things are very industry oriented, building systems, sharing your experiences with others in the organization. So it's very interesting because in academia, a lot of these things go through talks or presentations or a lot of almost all the time papers. But it's
Mm-hmm.
very different because a lot of times in a CV, which I'm not saying is an academic portfolio, but the way you normally organize things, it's very focused around papers.
Right.
And there
Papers,
are
papers, papers.
presentations, there are talks, but you talk about like sometimes invited talks first and things like that. Whereas a portfolio is really, I would say, conveying information to a different audience than necessarily your peers. So that would be probably more in academia, like maybe short courses or workshops and things like that. Um, and usually with a data science focus, I would say it has some sort of data analytics or like computational aspect. It's like, how do you actually do the work? Right. So
Right.
that's what I see as the essence of a portfolio versus kind of a CV, kind of broadly before we dig into the others. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of saying it. In general, when I think of an academic portfolio, I think of literally, I mean, a CV is kind of like the product that people end up putting together that you can communicate with someone via like your CV. You say, I am communicating to you my academic portfolio via the CV. There's not necessarily like a corresponding GitHub repo like I would
Yeah.
normally expect in a data science portfolio. And so the three areas that I think about for an academic portfolio are just like the description and highlights and summary of kind of your research, your teaching and educational your scholarship, and then like your contributions to or service to the university or the department or your profession and things like that. But I really like your phrase of practice there. Portfolio feels like to me it should demonstrate more practice, but in academics it's really like this CV that you're I mean it's most often I have found this CV that you put together, that's your portfolio. And it's built with like all your papers and all of the classes you've taught and all of this stuff. While in contrast, I think of the data science portfolio as something much more applied, like you said, with practice. It's we can get into kind of what that is, but I mean, it's often some kind of GitHub repo or blog posts that you've created that demonstrates the ability to not only um, master some kind of technical concept, but also communicate that concept in a
Yeah.
certain way.
Yeah, I do think I can probably think of some examples, but anytime I hear a portfolio, especially in data science, I think of code. Just
In data
I
science,
think of
yes.
code.
But
Yes, I think
without the phrase data science, do you think of code? Because I don't. And if it's just like academic
no.
portfolio, I don't think of code.
Yeah, so in acad so yeah, I think you hit the right mark, right? Academia stands on like three pillars for each person, right? Research, teaching, and service, right?
Yes.
And data science, it's very different. It's I wouldn't say, there are aspects of all of those, but it's not like as I think as well defined as that. But when I hear the word portfolio, right, I like to think of like an artist, right? I'm awful
Yes.
at art. Like
Me
I'm
too.
not like not that I'm like yes, but I see them like like an actual physical portfolio. They
Yeah.
open up and go
Yeah. Yeah.
through like different things they painted, and
Hmm.
but it shows their skill, right? That's
Yes.
what it does, and
Yes.
that's why I think about data science. I think you show your skill with a GitHub repo, and you're like, look. And then people can look at it, right? Like I do not in any way think looking at a GitHub repo of very elegant code, in my opinion, is to the same level of beauty as seeing like fantastic art. But like some of it you can appreciate, right? You can appreciate it's like, wow, that was really well done, really, really well documented, really well put together. And you can see the inputs and outputs, and it's like that gives value, right?
Yes. That's a lot of value. Um, I think one difference for me between just a data science portfolio and an academic data science portfolio is that it's the data science portfolio can be really anything. I mean, it's really like any type of analysis where you're, again, trying to demonstrate some kind of technical skill and communicate it. But an academic data science portfolio, it's more about demonstrating how the product or the software package or the web app, whatever you've built, like is working towards maybe something more related towards academics. Like I built this curriculum in R Markdown. I built a book, for example, that's really available towards building a course at this university, for example. So
Yeah,
there's this theme or this, uh, what do you call it, trend or emphasis on academic type things. So whether it's again research or education or service, but it's really some kind of code or some kind of
yeah,
website or some kind of software that you have built. That's
yeah.
one difference in my mind.
Yeah, and so I think a great example of this is your open case studies. So
Mm.
you and a whole team of people have put together open case studies, and the idea is like academia on the left hand, right? You would say like it would probably be a straightforward way to present not this, but straightforward way to do this in like another department or a different way. Is like I created a course,
Yes.
right? It's
Yeah.
it's like this is how many students took it. These are the profile of those students. This is like
What I
the
taught.
the
Yeah.
syllabus
Hmm.
exactly the things that you could. And open case studies is on the other hand very different, right? It's not only geared towards educating a lot of people. It's educating people not at the institution and
Right.
a larger community, but also creating tools and a set of documents that teachers can use, right?
Hmm.
That allows it to be much more open, and like it's almost like open source software, it's open source education. And so that I see that it's not a dichotomy, it's just different emphasis on different things, on how you would see it in an academic light versus a data science academic light.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said there is trying to think about the educator or the teacher. So for me, that's one difference. Like in data science, whenever I build an analysis or I'm building something, I'm always thinking about who's going to use this. And in academia, it's if you're building a course, I mean, you're building it kind of for yourself to be able to teach students what you need to teach. But in data science, I find you're often thinking a lot more um, about the end user, or you're trying to develop some kind of like deep empathy of what
Yeah,
their needs are, kind of like in a
yeah.
design thinking kind of fashion. So
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a very big difference. I mean, I said this in the last podcast, but like I create software for one person and that person is me, right? But in the back of my mind, I do hope that other people will use it or myself in 6 months, right? But at the end of the day, I still do think that does come into play. Like designing things for somewhat usability of someone else, especially yourself in the future, right? Not
sure,
defining things
yeah,
as like X
definitely.
or Y. It's like, oh, I created that argument name intentional, knowing that people were going to get confused and I'm trying to make it less confusing. So it's interesting because those principles really come from a strong educational background, in my opinion, right?
Yeah,
So it's funny because it's I'm just saying it is a strong software development kind of stint, right? Making code that people can understand, but really a lot of those principles are strengthened by like your educational pushes in academia, which I don't think that necessarily means academics make the best software. That is not what I'm proposing, but those thoughts and those philosophies definitely do intermesh.
yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay. I hope we've given a description of what we mean by academic data science portfolio.
Well, the other thing is the reason I brought up the CV is like they're not orthogonal, but they are very, very, very different, right? Like a CV, a lot
Yeah.
of times it's like, where have you gone to school? Where has your
Hmm.
education been? What are you currently working on? Or like like your literal position. And then it's
Hmm.
like papers, and then it's a lot of other things like presentations and talks, and then it's other stuff. And the
Hmm.
talks and the other stuff really are the entire data science portfolio in some respects, right?
Yeah. I mean, in industry, for example, I think those two things that you're describing are separated into your resume and a data science portfolio. The resume
Yeah.
would contain that
Hmm.
information that you first described, like where did you go to school and where have you previously worked. But you wouldn't necessarily find, countless links to projects or websites or
Yeah.
extensive GitHub repos about all the things that you have built to include in a data science
Yeah.
portfolio. Well, in academic, that's kind of like all muddled up. I mean, they've
Yeah.
decided, academia has decided like a way to organize it in a what they call a CV, a curriculum vitae, but it's like all in one spot essentially.
Yeah. And it's like I'm not saying so there is a large effort now to make it more valued, but in many times in the past it was like this other stuff that was interesting. Like if you've like in a data science portfolio, if you made a tutorial that's a blog post that like a million people have seen, like that's like number one on your list where it's
Sure.
definitely not in a CV. And like, in a portfolio, you probably won't do this, but like it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility, in my opinion, if you attached a screenshot of a beautiful dashboard, right?
Right?
Usually it could
Yeah.
be interactive, but like if you had to give like something on paper, like a
Hmm.
beautiful dashboard, whereas like you're not doing that on a CV.
Well, there are these pushes to like write CVs in R Markdown on websites. I mean, I forget the exact R package that's
There's
available.
data driven CV, I think by Nick Strayer that
Yes,
came
thank
out
you.
recently. Yeah.
So there are these pushes to kind of integrate the two, but I would say in general that's not the norm. Like those are the exceptions to the rule right now.
I like the effort, but when someone's asking for a CV, they're like, give me a
They
PDF.
give me a
Give me
PDF.
a
I know, I know.
PDF. I don't want a link.
But
Right.
there's pushes and it's nice to see it, I guess. Like I just want to acknowledge that.
But that I think actually now that you say that, I think that's a good definition in some respects of an academic data scientist. They have their resume and then they have their portfolio, and kind of those two together combined, kind of like Captain Planet style, like make your CV, right?
And in some cases, like if you are in academia, you're a data scientist in academia, somebody will just legit want just a CV. They just might want that. Like you can imagine if you're going through some kind of like promotion process, they do not. If the school is going to want to systematically evaluate a bunch of people, they want like a uniform CV. They don't want something that's dramatically different that they have to figure out where everything is in the CV. So I get that. But for the average Joe, like for the average person, I find that's just not a great, not as useful. Like I like it to be more interactive. I like for the person to show me what they're most proud of. Um,
Yeah.
so,
And it's funny because I will say this. So when I went on the market a few years ago, like in my CV, I had one, I had downloads next to my
oh yeah.
package
Hmm.
names, right? So there's a CRAN logs. I think CRAN is all capitalized. There's a package that I think our studio provides all the downloads for like all the packages from their CRAN mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an R repository. So if you have a package on there and they download it from there, they can keep track of that, which is really a nice service. Right, there's a lot of we could talk all day about like whether downloads or users and all this kind of thing are the better thing, but like that can be measured pretty easily. So I put that in my CV,
Yeah.
and then I put like a set of Shiny apps, and it was funny because I got all across the board responses to that. Somebody was like, "Why did you put that there?" And I was like, "Well, if you're asking that, then I think we might be on a different. We might not have the same priorities." Um, it's like I see that almost. It's not the same, but as like citations for papers, like why would you put number of citations next to a paper? And some don't. Some people don't, right? Which is understandable. But like the on the other end, like I had sit down interviews where we talked like 20 minutes, more than half the time about like a random Shiny app I created about
Oh,
like
wow.
cars. It was like you have an abandoned car Baltimore Shiny app, and I was like, yeah, I
Yes.
didn't move my car, so I would get ticketed. So I wanted an app that looked at 311 and see if somebody called in my car, so I would move it. And they were like, interesting, and it was like. Like 50, I didn't have 50 paper, but like, didn't talk a single lick about a paper I had, none of that stuff. So,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
that makes sense. Um, okay, I had a thought and then I've lost my thought. But
Well, yeah. So I'm just saying the CV can capture some of the things in your data science portfolio, but it is still
oh yeah.
separated. But again, if you're in academia, I still think the CV reigns supreme, and put everything that you would put on a data science portfolio in there, with some caveats that like screenshots are probably not what people are used to. And you can always buck the norms. Just understand that like a lot of people don't like change and don't like different things. So just be aware of that.
Okay, I remember what I was going to say. Google Scholar. So you mentioned citations, like being able to report the number of people who've downloaded a software package or who've cited a paper, for example. I recently discovered, I can't believe it took me this long, that there's an R package called, I think Google Scholar is the name of it. And it allows you to
There is
um,
a package called Scholar, and there's a package called Google or G
G
Site.
Scholar. Okay, I have to go back and check which one I used. But you give
The,
it
re-
like,
the reason I know that is I wrote G Site,
oh,
and
okay.
yeah, and Scholar is another person who I've battled with. No, it's somebody who wrote
Oh,
something similar
wow.
to
Now
to
I don't
scrape
think
your
I can
Google
tell you.
Scholar page.
I'm not sure.
Oh no, go for it. I love it.
I have to look this up in a minute. But I didn't know this. So I discovered this via somebody else who I saw do this. And so now I've got an R script that every time I want to basically update my CV, I just like run this R script. It updates all the number of citations for my papers by pulling it from Google Scholar. And then I write my CV, my academic CV in LaTeX. So it's really easy to just put the template in R tech. That way you can have R chunk or codes of R chunk, chunks of R code, sorry. And you can just like quickly pull out the number of citations. So for me, that's been
Yeah.
really nice. And then as you mentioned, you can do the same for citations for software as well. So
Yeah.
do you want to talk about your
Yeah.
package? Because now I feel really
Um,
bad.
no, not at all, not at all. I don't always publicize that because we're not 100% sure if it's in line with the Google terms of service.
Oh,
I believe it is. I actually believe it is. If it is your personal Scholar page, it is, I think, totally fine. So this was probably like 7 or 8 years ago now. So Jeff Leake, who's in our department, was like, I want this data. He's like, look, Scholar page, I want this data. And so myself and Andrew Jaffe and Jeff all sat down and did some work on it. And we created like a Google site. I think it was called Google site at first. And then that was like an R script that Jeff had posted on Simply Stats, which is a popular academic data science blog that was really kind of one at the forefront from our department. And pretty much it would do a word cloud, right? Back in the day, word clouds were all
oh,
the things, right? And
don't get me
so,
started. Yes.
and on one side, but it wasn't like, not analytical. It was on one side, like the removing some stop words like the and any articles and things like that, like a and an. On one side, it was the words in your titles of your papers, and on the other hand
Ah.
side, it was all your collaborators' last names. Kind
Oh,
of,
I see.
we didn't do anything. If you have multiple collaborators with the last name Smith, we didn't do differentiation and things like that. And then we revamped it into G Site, and that's kind of where it's now on Cran and Scholar. But Scholar is a much more comprehensive package that does Google Scholar, like grabs a lot of things from there. But yeah, you can get your H index. You can from Google Scholar. You can get some of the graphs. I will say the one thing I'm not sure Scholar has fixed, just in case you do go into this foray, if you have papers with a lot of authors,
Mm-hmm.
um, we make sure that I think we go to the individual um, paper page so we can grab all the authors. So if it's like 15 authors last author, I think the Google Scholar page
Oh,
gives you the So if you're really interested in your co-authors,
yeah.
then anyway, yeah. So yeah,
Hmm.
this turned into an interesting road. But okay,
All
so
right.
G Site is out there,
We'll
but
put it in the
you
show notes.
use yeah. So you use this to curate your CV and the downloads or the citations for your papers.
Yes, I just have an R script inside of a GitHub repo, and inside of that GitHub repo also contains an RTEC file as I build my CV in LaTeX, mostly driven because of the our school of public health has a very particular format that they like their CV in, and I just refuse to have or to maintain two different CVs. So I just adhere to whatever the format is that the school is in. But I do add some special touches, such as I add the number of citations by pulling in this data from Google Scholar and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because it is quite remarkable how little guidance or tooling you get for CVs for how important they are.
I know, right? And you can get such
Yeah.
pushback if it's not exact. Like,
Yeah, but there are other things that are like super helpful. Like I have something, I think it's like an R script that makes bold in my CV like where my name is in author order of a paper.
uh-huh, yes.
Right? And like that, I mean, a lot of times people looking at your CV, sometimes on the job market, like let's just be clear, like people are looking at number of papers where you sit in the author order a lot of times. And then
Hmm.
like that's just the truth of the world. And like if you are trying to get a job, make it easier. Like you can disagree on whether that's the right metric or not, but understand that's the metric sometimes being used. So make it easier for I think the people interviewing you to kind of be able to see the information that they want, whether you agree with it or not.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's get back to academic data
Act
science portfolios.
portfolios.
Okay, so what is the purpose of them? Like, if you had to give a reason, why would somebody want to do this? You're a data scientist in academia. Like, what's the benefit of investing the time and effort in doing this thing that's separate than just like an academic portfolio?
I feel like it's to show your skills with like a Z, skills Z, right? Like, no, I think that's true though. To like show like what you can do.
I For me, I guess, yeah, I think that's really important, but also I find if you don't go out of your way to make this to showcase what you've built or showcase your talent, like it's so easy for academics to just brush you aside and say, "Oh, this is not what I traditionally think of as scholarship for academia." And it's important to showcase and highlight what you have built and your contributions, and it doesn't always fit in like an academic portfolio box like
Yeah.
that we like to think of. And so for me, that's the reason you want to do it. And then what is in it? Well, one are to demonstrate technical skills, some kind of technical skill of sorts, and then two is also like data storytelling, communication, like being able to demonstrate, like you can take something like very complicated idea and communicate it in a way that can maybe hopefully be understood by a broader audience.
Yeah.
I just think it's so important for data scientists and academia to go that extra step. I know it's extra work, but otherwise it's too easy to be not valued. You're just going to be like so
Yeah.
undervalued in academia, and I don't want that. So I just think there's like this huge importance for data scientists in academia to invest this time and energy in creating these portfolios.
No, I agree. I think there's a huge you want to always, if you think this thing is important, if you think the work you do, like you went that extra mile, or like you package it, or you're just like, yes, everybody could have done this analysis that I did, but no, not I'm not no one, but like not as many people would have done it like in this reproducible way, or gone the extra mile and made a web app, or like some of these things, like it's very hard in a paper to say like, look at all the extra stuff we did, right? It's funny because you could spend days on an app, and in
Days,
a
yeah.
paper it's like, we also release an app, one line
One line,
URL.
that's it. Yeah.
And unless that's like the entire point of the paper, if you're showcasing that, and it's like, so you really do need to go the extra mile on the portfolio side to say like, look, like I know you're looking at the CV and it looks drab, but like look at all these awesome things. So I think you need to do it for two big reasons. One, to show other people that are evaluating your work that like, hey, like you might not think X, Y, and Z is impressive, or you might, but like look at all these other stuff that I value. That's one. And the
Mm-hmm.
second thing is, which is very important, is like you want to recruit students and postdocs and other faculty to work with you. And like that's the people that get excited by that kind of stuff usually are the people that you want to work with and the students you want to recruit. So you got to
Mm-hmm.
put it out there. If it's like, I looked at their website and it said that they do this and it was like boring, and it's like, oh, but they showed like these awesome apps or these awesome things, like that excites people.
Yeah. I guess another thing, just kind of following up on that, is it also shows initiative in the sense that it's like it's extra work that essentially somebody who's in data science and academia is now responsible for doing. I mean, like in addition to maintaining some kind of like traditional academic portfolio, you now also have to like produce. We're asking these data scientists to produce this extra thing, and so it's there's energy that you have to invest in that, and it's not always necessarily like immediately rewarded, but um, it shows like a ton of initiative, and it shows your motivation for wanting to make sure others acknowledge and are aware of your contributions, um, in addition to all the things that we talked about. For example, making sure that your work is not swept underneath the rug, making sure your work is highlighted and valued, and communicating to people what are the most important aspects and the biggest contributions or the biggest impacts that your work has had on whatever field you're in. So
Yeah. No,
um,
but like, oh, it broke my heart for a second when you were talking, because I had this glimpse in my mind that after talking about formatting the CV, you're like, this is an extra thing we have to do. And I'm like, if that becomes standard, then they're going to have another template for me to have to conform to. I
no,
hope not.
no, I mean, well, okay, that's a good question. Is there a standard template for a data science portfolio, academic data science portfolio? I would say
I
no.
mean, I don't think so. And it's funny because, like, I personally think this is definitely one of the many cases where like static PDF just it falls short compared to like an interactive capability or like a website, right? Like you can embed the app in an iframe inside of like, look, I have this app. It's like, oh, you can click on it. It's like, I think at least a data science portfolio compared to like a CV is definitely meant to be explored digitally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, right? Like I think you can, and there should be the possibility, but like mostly, if you're printing out a academic data science portfolio, you're doing it wrong, right? Like,
Would you expect like maybe a website, or say a GitHub, a person's GitHub list of GitHub repositories? Is that sufficient?
I think it is sufficient, but like I think the wording usually has to be a lot different. Like I think you definitely want to say what you did on the project, but like you talk about maybe some of the technical things that are really interesting, or like, or still the insights, right? Like what does this enable other people to do, or like you showcase like maybe a workflow or something. It's just not the same. You showcase different things, but I still think
Mm-hmm.
a collection of GitHub repositories is possible, but like I'm trying to think like what is like it's got to be curated because what is that? How is that any different than just someone going to your GitHub and listing the repositories, right?
For me, I guess the thing that I think about is like how much effort is it going to take for somebody who's looking at my academic data science portfolio? How much effort is it going to take for them to like by the time that they first click on whatever they're clicking on to getting the impact? I want to minimize that time. I want to minimize
Mhm.
the amount of energy it takes to understand the impact of whatever I have built. And so, whether that's a website, whether that's a blog post, whether that's a list of GitHub repos, like it's kind of up to you. I mean, people are busy, people don't have a lot of time, and so um, you want to showcase whatever you're trying to showcase in a way that's easily understood or gathered. I mean, that somebody can
Yeah.
immediately go like, "Aha, that's really nice." Like I might not get everything about it, and if I want to dig into it, I can, but I get it. And I find if
Yeah.
it's just a list of GitHub repos, there's usually more energy that's required to like sift through code. Just like if it's not, maybe it's like in a README file, you've got some of that. Um,
Yeah, I'm thinking what you're saying is in some respects you want abstracts for GitHub repos.
yeah.
Right.
Or it could be like an interactive digital abstract. I mean, it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be like a list of text necessarily, but you just
Yeah, the README should be that, but it definitely is not a
sometimes it's
lot.
just like author name, title, and like submit GitHub pull requests here,
Yeah.
issues here. Like that's what it is. And
All right, let's be clear. Most times it's like you should have a README.
yeah, or that. Yeah, like don't forget, add read me.
Yeah. So yeah, because I'm thinking like with papers, right? You can go to that paper and you can get a gist of what's going on with the abstract. Whereas like GitHub repos and a lot of software, that is like all across the board. There's not right. At least for every paper, right? I think would have an abstract. Whereas I think that is one of the things where you probably have to put in some more work in a portfolio to say like, look, this is a GitHub repo. But if you read me, it's either you do it on the GitHub side, which I would probably recommend, right? Definitely fleshing your README out in a
Well,
way
you
that
know,
it
you can
tells you.
actually take your README and you can make it a website. So you can actually convert your README in a GitHub repository and just like
Yeah.
in one line in your GitHub settings, you can just convert that into an HTML and then have like a link to a
Yeah.
website. That's like the bare minimum that you can do, but then it requires like populating the README at least.
Yeah, no. So I'm saying like I wonder whether like I'm trying to think of like if you do the work on the README versus you do the work on the portfolio making the abstract. I guess it doesn't really matter because you're going to copy one from the other one way. But like you should definitely whatever you do in the portfolio to make a short synopsis of that project, you should definitely make sure that's also on GitHub for like
Mhm.
everybody who doesn't know where your portfolio is.
Sure. Yeah. But again, it's just for me, it's all about like minimizing the energy that it takes for somebody to just understand what you did, and it's kind of up to you as the academic data scientist to decide whatever venue or mechanism that is the best way to convey this. I mean, um,
Yeah.
so
I wonder if you went by like if you sorted by like number of commits because like I feel or like number of work because like I feel like that really in some weird maybe not time management way but like effort management way really gives you a maybe a clearer picture for me what I actually spend my time working on software wise,
software wise, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um, I mean, it's you're gonna have bias and everything, right? Like if you made like a great piece of software that was super stable, and very narrow and modular, theoretically you'd have fewer commits because you don't have to fix a bunch of stuff, right? So it's like you don't want the squeaky wheel getting the grease, but I mean, a lot of times, number of commits is probably isn't the worst measure, but that's the interesting. You have measures.
there are measures. Yeah, there are measures. Um,
Okay, so for GitHub repo, Stephanie,
okay,
what are you gonna put in there? You got to put the URL.
the readme. I'm just kidding.
All right.
Now
So
that we talked
no,
about the
no, in the README, but in the portfolio, you got the URL. Are you putting like number of commits? Are you putting number of downloads? Are you putting like number of forks or like stars?
Well, forks can be overrated. Like, for example, our colleague Jeff Leake has like one of the most highly forked repositories on GitHub, right? Or something like that
Yes.
because of a
Yeah.
MOOC a massive open online course that he was a part of. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Forks can be cheeky.
I mean,
um,
you could say the same thing about citations, right?
Citations are for sure cheeky. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so what are the criteria that I'm using to quantify the impact, or like what is
Or like
literally inside of
what would you include in your academic data science portfolio for a GitHub repo?
um well, let's just say my portfolio is just I just point to my GitHub repo. Then it's just a matter of like, for within each individual repository, I would want to have, for example, maybe I would have like a list of education ones, or a list of research oriented ones or software oriented ones, and I would want to somehow
Yeah.
like document that. Like I would want to showcase and say like, I have built these 4 web apps for education classes, or these 4 web apps to explore COVID data, or whatever it is. I would want to like somehow organize and say, these are the main themes of what I work on. I work on COVID data, I work on data science courses, and these are a list and
Yeah.
a summary of my contributions somehow.
Yeah, that's interesting. So in some respects, I think I think you maybe had struck at the heart of the difference between an academic data science portfolio versus an industry or standard data science portfolio. In that, I still think from what you've said, at least the way you work, you would still maybe structure it in the sense of research, right?
But that's
Research
because we're
repos.
in academia.
No, exactly. But I'm
Yeah.
saying, research, research repos, teaching repos, and then software repos. Which I think. So this is the thing. This is what I'm trying to drive home. Is like right now on your CV and a lot of places. I believe developing open source software is not only research. It is a portion of service.
Open source software. Yeah, I
For
could argue say
right.
yeah.
So right, but I think there is a distinction, right? So like I'm just saying, like if we think of research, teaching, and service, and in that sense software comes under there, that
Mm-hmm.
would probably be a nice way to kind of merge the academic, 3 pillars, and the data science world, right, for your portfolio in academia data science. um,
I think that's completely fair. I mean, there probably are other ways of doing it, and the thing that I'm probably being ignorant about is that there are probably other topics besides research, software, and service that a data scientist, academic data scientists, might work on. There might be intersections of those 3 areas, for
yeah,
example, and it might be hard to define, like, do I put this here, do I put this here? Like, it's kind of a little
yeah,
bit of both, like you just said, service and research for software. And so it's a little bit more blurry, and I don't necessarily think you have to have like these 3 tiers. Like, you could, for example, just define one tier as software and not necessarily say this is research or this is service. Like, I'm just
yeah,
defining the tier as software, and
yeah,
I'm going to like list for you the software that I have built. But on some level, in academia, somebody somewhere is going to look at that and say, like, is this research or is this software? And whether that matters to your institution or not, I mean, it's kind of like up to the institution who's evaluating you. But
yeah. I have a good example. I think of that, right? So I have a piece of software called FSLR or FossilR. So
SLR.
FSL is a very well established neuroimaging piece of software that runs on Unix.
Okay.
Okay, like you. So I wrote an R package that literally just interfaces with it, right? So it's like you want to call this function in this way. I allow some like objects pass through stuff like that, but it essentially is like you have this installed in your system. You can interact with it through R.
Right.
That is something that I have heard many, many times. People are like, I think that's very useful. I personally don't even interact with the software FSL anymore, except through this intermediary package. So I think it's super useful. But like, I don't necessarily think that's research. I don't necessarily think that's teaching. I think that's like straight software. So I'm saying that there are things, and I'm agreeing with you because some things don't fall under that tier of either one, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still something you want to showcase and want to demonstrate, right?
Yes. Yes, I agree. And of course, when it comes time for your promotion and your evaluation, there probably will be some description that you will have to write saying, like, this is my contribution, just we'll say, to research. This is like, I view this as a contribution to research, and you have to, kind of like explicitly make that connection for someone. Um, and hopefully your chair in your department will help also like make that clear connection of like why this product or this web app is, or this piece of software is research. But
Yeah.
on some level, you're also being evaluated by non-academics. I mean, you're a data scientist just sitting in academia, working in academia. And so it's not necessarily the case that you always have to make that connection. And being able to have non-academics quickly understand the value and the impact of your work is also equally important. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people in academia talk about leaving the door open for academia when you go to industry. So if you go to industry, they talk a lot about like, well, if you're still publishing, that door to academia might still be open. And I think, you know, I think, you know, we also should have the discussion that like, not that the door of industry is ever really closed, but some of the doors of industry are not that open unless you showcase like, yeah, I know how to do software. Like if
this
you
is
want to
true.
transition to a a more standard data science role outside of academia, it's like, and you have like two repos, that's not going to bode well probably during an interview if you're getting hired to do software.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
and
Oh,
the
sorry.
other, sorry, the last thing I want to say is like I have, it's an unfortunate number if you're a numerologist person, but I have 666 repos.
Oh my
And
gosh. Really?
yeah, yeah. So the reason
Wow.
I have like it's a bunch of forks,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I
Okay.
also have a bunch of like everything I do is GitHub, is
Mm-hmm.
on GitHub more or less, like
Mm-hmm.
version controlled and things like that.
That's
So
amazing.
I'm just saying, like, you need to showcase and curate that because sometimes it's very hard, especially on GitHub, to, you know, especially if you're a collaborator on a project, to be like, you know, I might not be the owner of a repo, but like I might do so much work for that, right? Like we have the
Right.
Hopkins Data Science Lab, and you know, it's good because we have an organization, we can centralize things, but like they're not quote unquote, you know, my username's Michelle J2, but it's not like Michelle J2 repos. So it might seem like, oh, that's not his. It's like, actually, no, that is my repo. It's just on a different organization. So I'm just saying the curation is necessary.
No, that's a fair point. So I haven't thought about that aspect of it because I only have 70, I think, or something like that. So for me, that I hasn't even like crossed my mind that that would be. I mean, I guess 70 is also like a non-trivial amount of numbers, a non-trivial amount of repos.
Yeah.
But 600, you're blowing my mind.
Well, so this does lead me into one additional point I want to make, and that is not this is, you know, a little gripe with academia I have right now, and I believe strongly that like GitHub pull requests and helping other people to get their software or fixing bugs, fixing issues for other people. Sometimes it's just like what happens when you're working on a project. It's like that doesn't work this way. Oh, I know what's happening. I can fix it.
Right.
Right. And that is, in my opinion, 100% service.
Yeah, that is true. But how do you quantify that in
How
academia?
do that's really hard, right? So we
Yeah.
in our group run this our repository called Neuroconductor. So a lot, like there's I think over 100 packages in there. Like I have a large number of them, but like for example, like almost all of them I've sent at least one or two pull requests to try to get them to conform to our standards in a way. We try to really help, you know, the collaborators. So that's why I probably have like an extra like 50 to 70 or 100,
That
you know,
makes
repos
sense.
and stuff like that. So it does seem like oh my gosh, she has so many. It's like a lot of them are mine, a lot of them are fixes, but like it is very hard, like you said, to quantify or distinguish. Like I actually helped out a bunch of people that I don't even know,
Wow. Yeah.
right?
I don't have a good answer to that. Besides just like quantifying the number of repos in which like you would say that falls under that category. But even then, it's hard for an academic, like a
Yeah.
traditional academic, to understand the benefit of that. Like they might say, why are you wasting your time? You're not publishing a paper. And you're like, I'm this is like a service to like ultimately you sometime down the line, when maybe a student is going to use this software. So
Yeah.
it's hard to explain that.
And sometimes I feel the same way about reviewing for specific journals. Why are you
Mm,
doing that?
yeah, that's a good
And
point too.
and 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 that is another can of worms we do
For
not
another day. For another day.
for another day.
Okay, so let's
All
give
right, so
like
you
just
want to give us
let's
a
give an
quick synopsis of what
example.
you think?
Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah.
I was just gonna like talk about like
I was
one
gonna say, give us a
example.
synopsis of what you think.
So I think that there probably are a couple of types of portfolios you might want to demonstrate. Like you might want to demonstrate skills that are around like data cleaning and data wrangling. So there's a lot of, messy data out there on the web. Maybe you want to demonstrate the ability to pull data from an API. Maybe you want to demonstrate the ability to wrangle text with regular expressions. So I can imagine like many different types of repos that basically like require exploration and cleaning of different types of messy data, or it could be types of repositories or analyses exploring different types of questions. But on some level, you're trying to demonstrate some kind of technical skill, and there are a lot of technical skills that you could, demonstrate in the use of data science or data analysis. So I think I'm leaving this vague because it's hard to like wrap all of that into one thing. I'm just trying to give examples. But in this repository that you're building, or this analysis that you're going to build and contribute to your portfolio, there's usually some kind of messy data. There's usually some kind of question you're trying to answer. You're demonstrating the ability to clean and wrangle it. You're demonstrating exploration of data. I find that's one of the most undervalued things, that whenever I read or I'm learning about somebody's academic data science portfolio, they usually like clean the data and then they jump right into a model, or they jump right into an algorithm. And I don't have like a strong sense of what the data are, or like, why are you picking this particular model? And I find if you are willing to invest the time and energy in showcasing some plots, or showcasing like the essence of like why you chose a linear model or polynomial model versus a linear model, or why you chose this algorithm versus this, it helps me as a reader kind of understand. And then also just like the contributions of presenting your results and communicating it in an effective storytelling way. That is also another undervalued aspect I find of building a data science portfolio. What are like some things that you would expect?
Um, yeah, I think
I guess it's like for a data analysis, but then there's also like software that's not necessarily, maybe like a vignette would kind of follow that a little bit, but
yeah, it's interesting because yeah, I think that you hit something that's really hard to communicate. That like I have seen some people who really, really do exploratory data analysis well and fast, and like I wouldn't say rigorous is not the right word, but just like they explore, they don't exhaust everything, but they explore the space of the data well.
yes, they do. Yeah.
And it's hard to convey that in an analysis or a repo. And weirdly enough, sometimes I find that in just like one the weirdly the structure that they've structured a project, like the folder structure, sometimes I'm like, oh, like you could be a terrible data analyst, but if I see you have like standard, like, I have like code, data, results, raw data folder, like if you have a structure to that, I'm already like, maybe they know what they're doing. Maybe. Um, but like usually it'll be like an R Markdown document that is just like a bunch of things with comments in there. That's like, I saw this, we did this. Um, so from the data analysis point of view, I think it's probably hardest to convey the EDA and all the cleaning you've done, but like that can be shown in like the extensiveness of the cleaning, right? Like if you have 100, like 1,000 lines of code cleaning the data, I'm like, that data is probably, they probably saw a lot of stuff,
They
right? So
probably did.
data,
Yeah.
yeah, but data cleaning, like really, the truth of it is, if you get some data that's really all over the place, like it takes a lot of code to sometimes get it right. And so just saying like data analysis scripts, like showcasing like this is how much it took to clean the data somehow, is really useful in a repo.
But there's
um,
some level of curation that you want. I mean, similar to when you write a paper, like an academic paper, you're not going to showcase every single analysis that you did. Like there's a level of
yeah,
curation and a lot of
yeah,
like an editorial aspect of picking and choosing what to show. And so in a portfolio, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say you would want to showcase everything. Like you would want to curate it. And if you're going to write a blog post, for example, you curate that and you say, you maybe say like, I also explored this, but this was like a terrible reason because of the following, like ABC.
Yeah.
Or maybe like you summarize, you create like scripts and say like, I created a script just because I had like 1,000 lines of code to wrangle the data. And now I'm just going to like point you to that. If you want to know more about it, you can go there, but I'm just going to focus on the modeling aspect, or I'm going to focus on this aspect of it. So I think it's
Yeah.
important to curate, I guess, is my point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, I think if you're creating a portfolio, there's many different audiences, just like your CV. But the thing is, like, what are you trying to convey? It's like usually, like, I can do X, right? Some sort of, task well, or like if you want someone who like knows how to do something, like I'm the person to go to and trying to pitch yourself like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to get like a job, or like you're trying to put a grant in or something and saying like, look, like you might not be sure if I can do this. Here is concrete examples of like I can do what I'm saying I can do.
You can do this, yeah. And then of course it's like good fodder to bring up if you're ever interviewing and things like that. Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing is like excite people. Like some of the coolest stuff are like just web apps that like do fun stuff that like
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, listen, I have done papers that I feel very proud of. Um, but they're not the most exciting, right? Like sometimes. And I mean that like not of the content and like the results, but it's just like, yeah, okay, like that result seems pretty reasonable that for that disease. And it's like, but look at this app that can like tell you where your car is. It's like, sometimes people get excited by flashy stuff. It's like throw a little bit of hype in there. Get them excited about you.
Yeah. Okay, so you talked about like software or web apps. What would you
Yeah.
expect to see if you're trying to demonstrate that, not a data analysis necessarily, but you're trying to
Yeah.
demonstrate a piece of software or a web app that you built or something like that, or something that you built for a classroom? What would be the best venue or way to showcase that? I mean, one idea is like a vignette. So that often
Yeah.
is included as part of a software package, for example, but that's not necessarily, I mean, maybe that's what you showcase.
Yeah. That's hard. So yeah, I think we definitely should expand. Like portfolios aren't just GitHub repos, right? So like, um, definitely web apps. Sometimes like I would even say maybe testimonials,
Mm,
of like
yeah.
people saying like this person, LinkedIn said he's good at analysis. I don't know, something like that. But for web apps, you got to put either I think a screenshot or just like something where it really captivates a person. Like I want to click that. I'm going to click that and see what it does. Like, right, that's what you want. You want someone to look at that. It's like I got to see what this is,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So however you can do that, get them to click on the link and actually view the app, like
So
do it.
clickbait.
Click, yes,
Click,
clickbait.
clickbait. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so now I'm going to be a little judgy. When you first start exploring somebody's GitHub repo or their academic data science portfolio, what are some like key things that immediately you clue in on that you're like, that might suggest this is somebody who knows what they're doing or doesn't know what they're doing, or somebody who's, experienced versus not? Like I'll give you an example. Like say you're starting to look through somebody's GitHub repos and they don't make a lot of commits. Or another example would be they have a ton of open issues. Like, do you view that as a positive thing, a negative thing? Like maybe they just work on one or a couple of things very extensively, or maybe they just don't care about issues, or maybe they don't have enough funding to invest the time and energy to address those issues. Like you can perceive those good and bad, and I don't know how you
All right,
think about it.
I'll go a step back. Like
Okay.
zero thing. I'm like, do you have a standard avatar? Get out of here. Like that
Oh,
is, I'm sorry. Like that is like the egg on Twitter. I'm like, if you interact with software a lot,
uh-huh.
like, and you have a standard avatar, I'm like, that maybe it's just me, but that eventually will annoy me enough to change it.
But is that just personality? Like, I mean, it could just be somebody who's like super lazy and it's like, why do I need to do this?
That tells me they're super lazy. Like I don't know.
We're being
I'm
judgy. I
just
know we're being judgy.
hey, I'm being 100% judgy. If I see if you have a GitHub and it's the standard like whatever is it Alien? What is it? It's from
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
think
I
one of those
mean,
arcade games. I can't remember, like Galactus or something. I forget. But if you have that, then I'm like, I don't know about that.
Okay, so standard avatar versus not. What else?
Yeah, but like issues are a mixed bag because there's a couple. There's like I think one open issues is totally misleading because you want really the ratio of open to closed, right,
Mm-hmm.
or open to total. The second thing is like if you have a lot of issues, that usually I think means most times one of two things. One, you do a lot of your project management on GitHub. And you are very adamant about putting issues, and that's how you kind of knock things out.
If they come from you, but what if they come from others?
Yes, that is, but that is usually one way for a lot of issues. The other way is like you have a piece of you have a thing that other people use a lot,
Yeah, that's another way of putting it. Yeah.
and usually, so I will say this: like if you have 1,000 issues, I don't know, maybe that's a lot. That's a lot of issues. But like, so I'm not going to necessarily out of the gate discount someone for having a lot of open issues. Um,
Yeah, no, I
so
agree. It could be good and bad. I just was curious how you
Well,
perceive it.
in both settings, I initially think it's good, right? You do project management okay in that way, or like you have something that's popular. Now I have to get into the repo to be like, gotta see like, okay, that one's about like 10 years old, or that's 5 years old, okay, and like there's been no movement. You know, I then you might get a little bit more judgy, but again, like there's bots and stuff that like close stuff out. So I'm saying a lot of issues are not out of the gate bad. But if you have a lot of really old ones and don't clean it up, then I'm
Hmm.
probably going to be able to be like, I don't know if they're really working on this. But really, the last thing I'll say is like, I look and I'm like, when was the last commit on a
Mm.
repo? If it was like 2 days ago, I'm like, yeah, they're working on it.
Okay, but let me pick on you for a second. You have 600 plus
Yeah.
repos, so you can't possibly, be actively maintaining those,
No, they're
all
all
of them.
garbage. No, I'm kidding. Kidding.
So, I mean, how do you suggest like keeping all of that? And then does that like reflect poorly on you that you're not, actively making commits to all of them?
That's a good question. I mean, I could probably clean up a lot of forks I have. That's a maybe a GitHub hoarder. Maybe I'm a GitHub hoarder.
Oh,
Um,
personalities. I like where this is going.
yeah, I wonder if that's the case because I'm just saying like I wish so I don't know. I have to look into the GitHub API a bit, but I'd want to be able to curate it where someone could click and say like these are like I am not a it's not a fork. This is
Hmm.
my repo, right?
Yeah,
Versus all those other things to be able to like get a better accurate picture. Because I agree. Yeah. I don't know. I'm thinking about like whether I should delete those forks or not, and I don't have a good answer for you.
I don't either. This is just like purely for fun. So for me, I also look at the last time a commit was made, and if it's like a piece of software that's going along with like a paper, I mean, I have projects that I for sure haven't made a commit to in quite some time, and it still works. And I mean, they're like maintained on bioconnector build systems, for example. So I know that they compile and I know that the software runs. Otherwise, Bioconnector will gladly send me an email saying your software no longer works and you need to update it. But then there are just, random pieces of random repositories that are not sitting on like some build system. Maybe
Yeah.
GitHub Actions would be a way to kind of curate that.
That's what I'm
Um,
saying. Like, you know what? Badges matter.
Batches.
I'm gonna say it, badges matter. Like, not all badges. Some badges don't matter at all. Like, but like they inform badges inform me about stuff. Like, if
That's true.
is it passing R command check? Like, and now with GitHub Actions, that is like one line of code in R, and you are set up for GitHub Actions, and you are moving along. So, like, if you have a check badge from GitHub Actions. If you have a crayon badge, just tell me the number of downloads or the version that's on there. Like those
Right.
things lend some credence to me that like this person went through a couple extra hoops to make sure this stuff works.
Right. Right. And then I guess another thing that I often think about is documentation. So, I mean, whether it's a software package or whether it's documenting or commenting, like it's not just like if you're writing a blog post and it's just code, 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 and there's not a lot of like narration or storytelling that kind of goes along with it and like interpretation of what's happening. And the corresponding would be like documentation in a software, like explaining what does this function do, why, how would you use it, thing like that. So whether it's software or whether it's analysis or whether it's a web app, like I find the use of documentation to be really important in my I guess, judginess. Like
Yeah.
I'm I'm
Yeah.
more interested and more excited about something when I can read the R code or I can read the Python code. And I mean, of course, it may take me a minute, but if somebody's willing to like document all of that, I'm greatly appreciative, I guess is a way of saying it.
Yeah. I mean, and so to that effect, I will say like if you have like a short or not well documented readme, that doesn't necessarily hurt you. But if you have an extensive readme, that helps you.
That helps. That really does. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and I think if you've put yeah, again back to back, if you put your code on a standard repository, that lends some credence that you went through some extra hoops to get it to work, and you want other people to use it. So, um, yeah, so I think for a GitHub repo, those are some good rundowns. I'm actually thinking. So, just lastly with the portfolio,
Mm-hmm.
the way I actually see it now is almost like a slide deck, right? So that like
What
if
do
you
you
were to
mean?
give like let's say I don't know if all of you have been to like a dean's lecture or a lecture that kind of gives you like a 30,000 foot view of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
I think like you should be able to encompass every one of your like things items on your portfolio as like one slide.
So you're thinking about like talks now. I mean, kind of in a sense. Like if you
I,
had to give a
yeah,
talk on your data science portfolio, not just necessarily like a talk on one project, but could you give a talk on your portfolio as a whole? And what that could manifest as like a slide
yeah.
per project.
I think if you gave like I mean 60 minutes or a minute a slide something like that, but like I think yes, I think there should be almost a one-to-one correspondence between the blurb and the thing and an item in your portfolio and a single slide in a slide deck. If someone wanted to say like from a data science point of view in academia, what do you do? There should be almost a one-to-one correspondence.
Would you consider this like an optional thing or more of like an expected thing, like a more required thing for a portfolio, academic data science portfolio?
I will say, as someone who doesn't have one, I hope it does not become expected because that just means more work.
Right.
But um, I think if you are I would still, okay, so I don't think it's required, but you should probably have the machinery or the content or whatever almost together in your CV. And if you don't, then that means to me, usually you are not putting enough, you are not showcasing your data science work enough in your CV.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, so we got Shiny, we got web apps, we got maybe
Oh,
some blog posts, we have GitHub repos,
what about
like,
like competitions, like people who
oh,
can who compete in that? How would you showcase? Sorry, I know we're running a little bit past the hour now. How would you fit that in to a portfolio? Like I competed in a Kaggle competition and I'm 100th place or something. I mean, what what would you
yeah.
do
Well,
there?
so I think you would put probably your rank, probably how many people competed in there, the
Collaboration,
content,
yeah.
what is the target of the competition? Because like if you got 10th place and there were 10 people,
That's
okay,
worth noting.
uh, I probably could have got 10th place doing nothing out of 10 people. I'm not trying to discount that, but if you got 10th place out of like 10,000 people, like you don't have to win it to show that like you were highly competitive.
But like, yes, how would you convince an academic, like a traditional academic, that the time and energy that you invested in this competition is
Yeah.
useful? Is that academic, or I mean,
Is that scholarship?
is that
That's a
scholarship? Yeah,
I don't think so necessarily.
to me
It
too.
hurts me, pains me to say that, but I don't think so. I do think it shows a rather kind of rare skill set that like you can take a data set on your own or with a small team, do something quickly and effectively in a short turnaround time frame, which is sadly, as we saw with COVID and some of the COVID related work, that is not how academia works.
I will say, yes, I totally agree. I will say the best positive spin that I've seen on competitions is to write a paper of like basically summarizing all the results of what you and your teammates and your competitors found. Like if
Yeah.
you came in third place, for example, out of 10, somebody won that competition and somebody, like the people who lost that competition, and they're usually reasons for that. Like this model was the best and these models performed the worst. What was it about the models that performed well or did not? I mean, you can learn from that, like as a field
Yeah.
going forward, but it's usually in the form of a paper at that
But
point.
the problem with that is most times, so like Kaggle is a kind of a different cut above, but like there are other grand challenges I've competed in with like imaging segmentation and stuff like that. The problem with that is in some respects, um, that paper is usually run by is usually
Yes.
written by the organizer. You
Yes.
contribute a
Yes.
small blurb to that, and you can write an additional paper about it. But like, um, I would say the largest impact comes from the organizer's paper of all the comprehensive results.
That's a fair statement. Yeah. But that's like, I guess in my mind, the only, like the best positive spin that I've seen on it, which is not, again, ideal.
Well, I will say this, right? So I think we are coming at this in some respects from probably a faculty point of view. And, there are a lot of people who
Oh, yeah.
now have done Coursera or edX or a lot of different skill development online that they
Mm-hmm.
don't have a formal degree for. But like the portfolio, if you want to stay in academia or go in academia, allows you to showcase these things that like, hey, like if you look at me as a candidate for like this position to do data analysis, data wrangling, data management, data, all these types of things, my CV might not rise to the top, but this portfolio is going to blow you out of the water, right? Like,
That's a good
so,
point. Yeah.
so I'm just saying like from a maybe not from a I wouldn't say a faculty, but like especially non-traditional data analysts, right? Data analysts are coming from every field now, right? Like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of biology and things like that. That like if you saw like what degree do you have? And it was like a hard science, and you're like, why are they applying to this? Usually I think that shines in the data science portfolio.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think I agree with that. Yeah. Um, all right. So I don't want to. We should probably wrap up with some final thoughts. What are
Yeah. So
you have?
so I guess last things I'm just asking. So do you have anything? I mean, blog posts. Like, would you put Twitter on there? Like, what
Mm,
else? Is there anything else you would put in there that we've kind of like glaringly left out?
I don't know if I'd put Twitter on there. I think of Twitter more as like sci communicate or science SciComm, essentially, like the ability to communicate science to a broad audience. And Twitter is like one case, one way of showcasing that. Blog posts are another,
Yeah.
but blog posts can also, fall under the category of data science, academic data science portfolios as well. I guess the thing at the end of this discussion, I've learned that there's no template for this. There's a
Yeah.
variety of ways that you could showcase this. Um,
I still
but
think like YouTube would fall under SciComm, but like for example, I have a YouTube playlist of how to develop an R package and build an R package. Like that kind of stuff, I would still probably put on a data science portfolio for sure.
yeah, and I've also seen a lot of people move towards live coding, like as
Like Twitch or live streaming. Yeah.
yeah, via I mean, and that's like kind of at the intersection of maybe a data science portfolio and SciComm because you're
Yeah.
communicating, but you're also like showcasing a set of skills in a video format. So
Yeah.
that's
And
interesting.
interactive. Usually, you have commenters
Interactive.
if you have people
Hmm.
like saying like, "Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that?" It's an interesting medium that I think will be explored a lot further in the coming years.
I think so too. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, I don't know about you, but whenever I had like learned EDA or some of these things, I would like I wouldn't necessarily like. I remember sitting with my like an advisor or a more senior student or something, and it's like I'm doing this, and they're like, "All right, this is what I would do," and they would just like blow through like a bunch of stuff in like a minute, and I was like, my brain was just like melted. But I was like, okay, I will pick up. I picked up some of that by watching other people actually do analysis, which is like, in academia, it's super rare.
It's super rare to see that, but it's one of the best ways to learn that skill of how do you know when to do what next because you've seen somebody else do it and they've like talked you
Yeah.
through it kind of. um,
Yeah, so maybe it'll be like, in the future, live streaming full on data analyses, obviously if there's no HIPAA concerns and like everybody's on the IRB or something like that to see the data, but like maybe that will be like the way we really get this apprenticeship model kind of more off the ground for data science.
Maybe, yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely more efficient than like a one-on-one apprenticeship.
Yeah. All right. So last question. So
Okay,
if you're listening and you're like, maybe I should do one, what would you say?
where to start?
Where to start, or should you do one? Like, you're like, you have only so much time in a week. Like, should you do one right now?
If you consider yourself a data scientist and you're sitting in an academic setting, absolutely do it, because at some point somewhere somebody's going to start to say, can you show me what you've done? Can you show me like who you are, what you do? And if that doesn't exist already, make it, because it's
Yeah.
again just too easy to have your work undervalued in academia. Academia is a it can be a big overpowering thing, and if you don't conform to the way academia works, it's often very hard to stand out and get recognized for your work. So absolutely do it if
Yeah.
you don't have one.
Okay.
Where to start? I would, as you said, like GitHub repos are a great way of doing that, because those can build websites, those can build shiny apps, those can create software. It's a way to store a lot of disparate pieces of projects and information and analyses in one place. But then again, I like the way you said it. You need to have some kind of summary or slide deck that curates that for somebody who's going to evaluate you, or somebody who's going to be interested in your work and wants to know more about it and wants to talk about it. What about you?
Yeah. I don't know. I would say make sure all your like. I would say if you're going to consider this, definitely consider it, but 100% make sure all of the stuff that like you do that might in any way look favorable to you, put that on your CV for sure.
Your
Um,
academic CV.
your academic CV, like repos, like you don't have to go like not to the same level, but like definitely if you're developing software, put that somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
If you're developing apps, put that somewhere. If you're writing blog posts, put that somewhere.
I also, yeah, I put that in my CV as well. I just don't think it's highlighted to the same
No,
degree that an academic data science portfolio would be.
it's not. And like I will say this, if you are trying to recruit students, if you're looking for a new position, 100% take the time to do this. I'm not saying over the course of your career you should definitely do it. I'm just saying with time being strapped, I don't know if I would recommend someone like everyone to do it, but definitely under a lot of specific conditions. If you're going for promotion, absolutely
Or
do something.
even if you're just an applied student in a
Yeah,
department, like if you consider yourself an applied biologist or an applied chemist or something like that, being able to demonstrate kind of the skills and the communication that you have acquired up until that point in your career, that's super
yeah.
important as well. So
Yeah. I think that's a great lead in to end with. That after the discussion you and I had about the software award, we actually talked to our chair. We're going to go forward with that. So, like, that is another reason to do your portfolio is that you might get awards.
there's, yeah,
Yeah.
at Hopkins, we are moving forward with awarding our
And
students
there are,
good
I mean, and
software.
the ASA has a software best
That's true.
software paper, I believe, award in the maybe it's the data science or the computational statistics section. I don't know, but they have awards there. And lastly, I want to congratulate Stephanie for the Cops Leadership Academy 2021. What one of was it 9
Nine.
people?
Yes, it's this is the launch of the Leadership Academy, run by the American Statistical Association. 9 people were inducted, and there'll probably be a virtual Zoom announcement at JSM, or the Joint Statistical Meetings, in August. So yeah, it's good. I'm really just excited to give back to the community that has been so kind to me and so accepting, and so I'm looking forward to working with the other folks in the group to figure out how to best do that.
All right, we'll talk. Yeah, and we'll talk about what that academy does and is like on a future podcast, and so you can go into it in more detail.
That sounds good. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
As always, you can follow us on Twitter at correspondauth, or my handle is strictlystat, and Stephanie's is Stephanie Hicks, and you can email us at thecorrespondingauthor@gmail.com.
What episode is this? 19. Sorry.
19.
Thank you. Okay.
19er.
Do you want to do the intro today?
Nope.
All right.
I always have the outro, so I'm giving you the intro.
Oh, I see.
Unless
now.
you want me to.
No, this is good.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back. Welcome back.
We're doing this exciting style.
To Jock Jams 2021. So you think you can dance 5,000?
Okay.
This episode was edited by Jessica Crowell, and special thanks to the Data Science Lab for their help and support.